Hi and welcome to my Parsha Share. Thank you to Aaron and Lillian Fuchs and to Jason and Alexandra Fuchs for sponsoring this Parsha Share in memory of Aaron's father and Jason's grandfather, Heinrich Fuchs, Chaim Shol ben Yitzchak, Zichron Lebracha, whose Yahrzeit is on the 12th of Tammuz. May his neshama have an aliyah, may we be zeicher to see Tchias HaMesim. Today, I'd like to delve into the fascinating narrative of Bilam. Bilam is a complex character, and his story is found in Parshas Balak. At first glance, he seems to be a positive figure, capable of extraordinary feats. While his extraordinary powers could potentially include successfully cursing the Jewish people, he is reluctant to do so, and in fact, he never ends up doing it. That's another story, not for today. In Bamidbar chapter 23, we read about Bilam for the very first time. Vayishlach Malochim el Bilam ben Ba'er, and Balak sent messengers to Bilam, the son of Ba'er. Leimor, hine am yotza mimitzrayim, hine kisa esein haaretz, v'yoshev mimuli. Behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the surface of the land, and they are dwelling opposite me. King Balak was clearly alarmed by the presence of the Israelites, of the Jewish people. He describes them as covering the surface of the land, indicating their vast numbers and the threat he perceived. V'ata lechona ora liesa amazeh, ki otzum hu mimeni, ulai uchal naker boy, v'agarshehu min haaretz. Please come and curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to strike them and drive them out of the land. Balak is desperate for Bilam's help. He believes that Bilam's curses are powerful enough to weaken the Jewish people, making them easier to defeat and to drive away. Ki yodati es asher tevarich mavarach v'asher ta'or yu'ar. Because I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. Balak's faith in Bilam's abilities is absolute. He believes that Bilam has the power to alter the fate of nations through his blessings and curses. Now, suddenly, God enters into the story. God came to Bilam and said, "Who are these men with you?" It's incredible. Bilam, who's not Jewish, he's a prophet. God speaks to him. And what is God talking to him about? God is questioning Bilam about the visitors. Vayomer Bilam el Halekim, Balak ben Tzipor, Melech Moav, Sholach Elai. Bilam said to God, Balak, son of Tzipor, king of Moav, has sent these people to me. Bilam explains to God the purpose of the messenger's visit. He doesn't hide anything, presenting the situation exactly as it is. God responds, Vayomer Elokim el Bilam, Lo telech imohem, lo to'er es ha'am, ki baruch hu. God said to Bilam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. God's instruction is clear and unequivocal. Bilam must not go with the messengers, nor should he curse the Jewish people, because they are blessed by God. And Bilam, at least right now in the story, totally goes along with what God expects of him. So it seems. Vayakam Bilam b'boiker vayomer el sari Balak lechu el artzachem ki me'ein Hashem lesiti lahaloichi machem. Bilam got up in the morning and he said to the princes of Balak, "Go to your land, for God has refused to allow me to go with you." This initial encounter paints Bilam in a relatively positive light. He respects God's instructions and refuses to act against divine will, despite the pressure and potential benefits of complying with Balak's request. At this point, Bilam appears to be someone who recognizes the power and authority of God and is unwilling to defy him. He's showing a certain level of moral integrity, even humility, and he's a prophet, a man of God. I'm now going to skip to the end of the story. What happened to Bilam at the end? That's what I always do when I read a Wikipedia article. I skip to the bit at the conclusion of the article that talks about the end of the person's life and how they died. Bit morbid, but that's what I'm like. So here it is. After the Jewish people fall into the trap of engaging intimately with the Midianite women, the Jewish army goes to war with Midian. Vayitzbu'u al Midian ka'asher tziva Hashem es Moshe vayahargu kol zochar. They warred against Midian as God commanded Moses, and they killed all the males. And here's the bit about Bilam dying. Es malchei Midian hargu al chalaleim chameshes malchei Midian as Bilam ben Ba'or hargu bechorev. They killed the kings of Midian along with the rest of those who were killed, and they killed the 5 kings of Midian, and Bilam, son of Ba'or, they also killed him with a sword. Among the casualties in this war are the 5 kings of Midian and Bilam, who is executed by the sword. It marks the end of Bilam's life. Why did he get killed? The Torah tells us explicitly, Henheina hoyu livnei Yisrael bidvar Bilam limsar ma'al ba'Hashem al dvar pa'or tehi hamagefa ba'adas Hashem. Behold, they caused the children of Israel through the counsel of Bilam, the advice of Bilam, to commit a terrible crime against God in the matter of pa'or, which caused the plague to happen among the congregation of God. The verses here reveal that Bilam played a leading role in causing the Jewish people to stray and sin. His advice led to a breach of faith against God, resulting in the devastating plague. But how? Why? What's going on? Isn't Bilam a great prophet who earlier on, as we heard, did not want to defy God? The Gemara in Baba Basra, Daf Tesvav Amud Beis, talks about all the Gentile prophets that ever lived throughout human history. Sheva Nevi'im Nisnabul Umay Sa'olam Ve'eluhein Bilam V'aviv Ve'iyov Eliphaz HaTeimani Ubildad HaShuchi V'Tzoifar HaNamasi Ve'Eliyahu ben Barachel HaBuzi. 7 prophets prophesied to the nations of the world, and they are Bilam and his father Job, Eliphaz the Yemenite, Bildad the Shuchite, Tzofar the Nahamathite, and Elihu son of Barachel the Buzite. Bilam and his father are named as having been prophets to the Gentile nations. Job, Eov, is a well-known biblical figure who experienced tremendous suffering and remained steadfast in his faith. His story is a profound exploration of faith, suffering, and divine justice. Eliphaz the Temanite, the Yemenite, is one of Job's friends, Eov's friends. In the book of Eov, Eliphaz offers Eov advice and theological insights, though his perspectives are ultimately challenged by God. Bildad, the Shuchite, is another of Job's friends who attempts to explain Eov's suffering. His dialogue provides a window into the theological debates of the time. Tzofar, the Naamathite, is also a friend of Eov who participates in the discussions about Job's suffering. His role, like that of Eliphaz and Bildad, contributes to the rich narrative of the book of Job. As for Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite, he is a younger man who speaks later in the book of Job. He offers a fresh perspective, emphasizing God's greatness and justice. Elihu's speech is notable for its passionate defense of God's righteousness. The Sifri says something incredible about Bilam, quoting the pasuk at the end of Dvarim, Lo kam navi oid bi Yisrael ka Moshe. No prophet has risen in Israel like Moshe. The Gemara adds, Bi Yisrael lo kam, avo b'umay sa'olam kam. Yes, it's true. In Israel, none has arisen like Moshe, but among the nations, one has. Uman who is he? Bilam. This passage from the Sifri makes a startling claim. While no prophet as great as Moshe arose among the Jewish people, a prophet of comparable greatness did arise among the nations, and that prophet was Bilam. It's unbelievable. As great as Moshe? Greater than Moshe? What is the Sifri talking about? Moshe is described in the Torah as the greatest of all prophets who had a direct and unparalleled relationship with God. He spoke to God, ponim el ponim, face to face, and led the Israelites out of Egypt, receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. But the Sifri suggests that Bilam also possessed extraordinary prophetic abilities. His ability to communicate with God and his influence over nations set him apart as a significant figure in the ancient world, which means that right now we are faced with an intriguing question. How is it possible that such a great man of God could be the evil person we know he was, Bilam HaRasha? And how could such a person be considered greater than Moshe? What is the lesson here? The first time we meet him, Bilam refuses to curse the Israelites, respecting God's command. This demonstrates some level of integrity and fear of God, or so it seems. But Bilam's subsequent actions, including his advice to Balak that led to the sin of Pa'or, reveal a more troubling side. His willingness to harm the Jewish people for personal gain contrasts sharply with Moshe's selfless leadership. The assertion by Sifri that Bilam was greater than Moshe among the nations challenges us to think about the very nature of prophecy. It highlights the idea that prophetic ability is a divine gift that can be bestowed upon individuals regardless of their national or cultural background, or indeed their suitability for divine interactions. The Gemara in Brachos asks, Umi ikarischa kama dikutsha barichu. And is there anger before God? In other words, is it reasonable to suggest that God gets angry and has times when he is totally angry, enraged? The Gemara answers, in the Tanya Gol Zayim B'chol Yom. Yes, says the Gemara, for it was taught God gets angry every day. Asks the Gemara, and how long is his anger? How long does it last? The Gemara answers, Rega, a moment. But how long is a moment? The Gemara asks. The Gemara has an extraordinary answer to this question. Echad michamishim ribu u'shmoina salofim u'shmoina meos u'shmoina u'shmoina b'sha'ah. 158,888th of an hour. That's a rega, which, if you calculate it, is less than 1,000th of a second. It is a tiny fraction of time. V'zuhi rega, ein kol bria yechola lechaven ois shah chutz Bilam HaRasha. Says the Gemara, this is considered a moment, and no creature can precisely calculate when this moment occurs, when it happens, except for Bilam the Rasha, because the Torah says about him, V'yodea das Elyon, he knows the knowledge of God. Bilam is described as possessing the extraordinary ability to precisely determine the fleeting moment of God's anger, something no other creature can do. The Talmud explains that God's anger is momentary and incredibly brief, lasting only 1,000th, literally 1,000th of a second. Bilam's ability to determine this exact moment in advance highlights his unique and profound insight into divine matters. Given Bilam's extraordinary abilities, we're again faced with a profound question. How is it possible that such a great man of God could be the evil person we know he was? And how could such a person be considered greater than Moshe? What is the lesson here? What are we trying to learn? I think I have an answer, and it's a really important faith lesson. Bilam's abilities were undoubtedly a divine gift, but it was his moral and ethical choices that determined how he used these gifts. Unlike Moshe, who used his prophetic ability selflessly to lead and guide the Israelites, Bilam's intentions were primarily driven by personal gain and malice. Bilam's story accentuates the critical importance of character and integrity. Great abilities alone do not define a person's greatness. It is how these abilities are used that truly matters. Moshe's greatness was not just in his prophetic prowess, but in his incredible humility, selfless dedication, and his unwavering commitment to God's will. The Mishnah in Ovos gives us another perspective on Bilam's character. Kol mi sheyesh biyodo shlosha dvarim halolu mitamidav shel Avram Avinu. Anyone who possesses these three traits is of the disciples of Avraham Avinu, of Abraham. And if they have the three opposite traits, they are of the disciples of the wicked Bilam. What are they? What are these traits? Ayin toiva, v'ruach nemucha, v'nefesh shefela, mitamidav shel Avraham Avinu. Those who have a good eye A humble spirit and a meek soul are of the disciples of Avraham Avinu, of Abraham. Ayin ra'av ruach gavoya v'nefesh rechava mitalmidav shel Bilam harasha. And those who have an evil eye, a haughty spirit, and a greedy soul are of the disciples of the wicked Bilam. Ma bein talmidav shel Avraham Avinu letalmidav shel Bilam harasha. What is the difference between the disciples of Avraham Avinu and the disciples of the wicked Bilam? In other words, what practical outcome can we point to which shows the difference between these two types of people? Says the Mishnah, Talmidav shel Avraham Avinu, oichlin ba'olam hazeh, v'noichlin la'olam haba. The disciples of Avraham Avinu enjoy this world and inherit the world to come. Aval Talmidav shel Bilam harasha, v'ata Elokim taridem lebe'er shachas, Anshe domim umirma lo yechtzu yemehem v'ani aftach bach. The disciples of the wicked Bilam, and you, God, will cast them down into the pit of destruction. Men of blood and deceit shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in you. It's a pasuk in Tehillim 55:24. Evil eye, ayin ra. The evil eye represents jealousy and envy, a tendency to look at others with malice and a desire to see their downfall. Bilam students are characterized by this negative outlook, always seeking to undermine others. Conceited spirit, ruach gavoya. This trait is a combination of arrogance and pride, a sense of superiority over others. Bilam displayed this exact arrogance, believing in his own exceptional abilities and using them for personal gain rather than for the greater good. Greedy soul, nefesh rechava. A greedy soul is marked by insatiable desires and materialism, constantly seeking more and never being satisfied. Bilam's greed is evident in his willingness to curse the Israelites for a reward, showing his moral corruption. Meanwhile, the disciples of Avraham Avinu, of Abraham, possess a good eye, ayin tova. A good eye signifies generosity and kindness, looking upon others with goodwill and wishing for their success. Abraham's students embody this positive and supportive outlook. Then there is a humble spirit, ruach nemucha. Humility is the hallmark of Abraham's students, who recognize their own limitations and value others. Avraham Avinu himself exemplified humility, always putting others before himself. And finally, a meek soul, nefesh shafela. A meek soul is content and modest, not driven by excessive desires. This contrasts sharply with Bilam's greed and highlights the ethical and moral integrity of Abraham's students. The rewards for Abraham's disciples are both in this world and in the world to come. Their positive traits lead to a fulfilling life, and after their passing, they merit eternal reward. Meanwhile, the fate of Bilam's disciples is grim. As described in Tehillim, they are cast into the pit of destruction marked by bloodshed and deceit. Their negative traits lead to a life of turmoil and an early demise. Rabbi Nissenbaum, a prominent rabbinic leader born in 1868 in Bobroisk, Belarus, who was murdered in the Holocaust in 1942, offers further insights in his Sefer Kinyonei Kedem. Rav Nissenbaum was an active religious Zionist from a young age and was part of the secret Zionist association Netzach Yisrael in Volozhin Yeshiva. He was a Talmud of the Netziv. He was a brilliant speaker who traveled extensively, influencing Orthodox Jewry through his speeches to support the efforts for a Jewish state. During World War II, he remained in Warsaw, even though he had a chance to escape. But at least he left us some wonderful seforim, so he's not forgotten. Rav Nissenbaum acknowledges that Bilam possessed significant prophetic abilities, so remarkable that they warranted a comparison to none other than Moshe Rabbeinu. However, this comparison is not meant to equate their greatness. Moshe and Bilam are not the same. On the contrary, it is to highlight the stark contrast in their characters and legacies. Bilam's abilities were undeniably powerful, but they were used for self-serving and ultimately destructive purposes. The sages didn't just reflect on Bilam himself, but also on his disciples, who perpetuated his negative legacy. These disciples inherited Bilam's moral flaws. In contrast, Avram Avinu's legacy and Moshe's legacy is one of humility, dedication, and a firm commitment to God and his Torah. The Jewish people have held on to Moshe's teachings from the beginning of their history and will continue to do so until the end. Every day, both individually and communally, we affirm that no prophet has arisen in Israel like Moshe, emphasizing the eternal truth and relevance of his teachings. Rav Nissenbaum stresses the importance of understanding the legacy of Bilam's disciples. Their presence and influence did not end with Bilam. They continued to propagate his harmful teachings. Recognizing these traits and their destructive potential is crucial for maintaining the integrity and purity of Israel's mission and values. The Sfas Emes further illuminates the contrast between Bilam and Avraham Avinu. The Sfas Emes points out that even wicked individuals, like Bilam, exhibit a form of humility. However, this humility is superficial and self-serving. It's not real. Bilam's statement about not being able to defy God even if he were offered immense wealth actually reveals his deep-seated greed. His humility was just a platform for greater arrogance at a later stage. Bilam valued his supposed humility as something significant to God. I'm so humble. But it was driven by his desire for self-aggrandizement. God sees right through that, and hopefully so can we. What we revere and cherish is genuine humility. The humility of Abraham, the humility of Moshe. In contrast to Bilam, the righteous possess a truly meek soul. Their humility is not a means to an end, but an end in itself. They seek to be constantly connected to the source of life, recognizing that all vitality comes solely from the power of Hashem. Everything else is a distraction. The righteous do not seek personal gain or higher status. Their goal is to remain devoted to God and to live in a state of constant awareness of his presence and power. The teachings of the Sfas Emes provide us with a deep insight into the contrasting paths of Bilam and Avraham Avinu. By examining the superficial humility of Bilam and the genuine humility of the righteous, we are reminded of the importance of true devotion and selflessness. The lesson here is that greatness is not measured by external achievements or superficial traits, but by the sincere pursuit of righteousness and by truly wanting to connect with Hashem. As we strive to emulate the positive traits of Abraham's disciples and of Moshe Rabbeinu, we can all lead lives of integrity and purpose, leaving a legacy of goodness for future generations. The story of Bilam serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of arrogance and greed, and the eternal value of humility and devotion to God. And it cautions us that even people who are connected to God can be flawed, and that our job is to work on ourselves to be better people, and not necessarily to rely on others for sanctity, sacredness, holiness, and spirituality. We possess the Spirit within us. We can be students of Abraham. We can be disciples of Moshe. And if we are, that is the purest status any of us can have, worthy of God's greatest blessings and a life of joy in every sphere. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Thank you.